Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening. I'm going to do a series of, relatively topical live streams coming up. I put it out there on a few videos ago that I'd kind of got through the backlist of topics that I wanted to cover over the last few weeks in doing these live streams, which again, just reiterating, is why I'm doing this format without any production, and I'm just talking off the top of my head about subjects of which I'm somewhat knowledgeable anyway. So I put it out there saying, do you want me to continue? And a few people came back and said, keep it up and keep the videos coming. So I'll stick with this for a little bit as well. So I want to talk in this live stream chat about Black fatherless homes. Now, there's been an American Black politician who's recently raised it as an issue, saying that up to 80% of Black American households are fatherless. Now, I don't know if it's quite that high, but let's assume it's between 70 and 80%, because pretty much all the available stats seem to fall into that category. So we'll pick 75% as sort of the middle ground on this, but that seems to be quite high, certainly much higher than white or Hispanic or Asian households. So it appears to be, certainly in proportion and scale, a uniquely Black problem. So let's just sort of have a look at that. Now, this idea that's being put about that it's Black men are just so feckless, they en masse desert their families and desert their children. That's just a little bit too neat and convenient for me, and I don't buy it for even a moment. So particularly given that the issue wasn't big, it wasn't like this in, say, the 1950s and 1960s. It's something that's really started to become a big issue after President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society welfare state thing that was happening, and that seems to be the point at which it began to accelerate. But around the same time as that Great Society was coming in, there was also the drastic change in divorce laws, where she could kick him out of the house and keep the house, keep the children, and he had to pay her money even though he was getting kicked out. So that drastically changed the landscape in terms of what the marriage contract was supposed to constitute and the value it had in social and social interactive transactions. So those are issues as well. But let's just have a look at the idea of the fatherless home being caused by men just abandoning Black men just abandoning their wives and children. The issues surrounding the causes are far more nuanced than just desertion. That's bullshit in my view. What seems to be happening is there's a combination of factors. Now, if we look at and this feeds into Black abortion as well as an issue, but if we look at the amount of Black girls under the age of 16 having children to Black boys in approximately their own age, in some cases even younger, then we can't call that a constituted family, and we can't say that the 15 or 16-year-old boy who suddenly is meant to become a pillar of society in terms of getting the job and bringing home the paycheck and living his life as a parent and a father and a husband, that because that doesn't happen, that there's somehow a problem in society. Now, it's not simply a case of promiscuity either, although you can wave that around as one of the attendant sort of causes or feed-in factors. But we've got a situation where in reality there's a lot of procreation going on with Black girls as young as 12 and 13, and that's not ever going to be a legally constituted family or even one that's acceptable from a practical perspective. So let's take that out of the equation first. The second thing is, or another issue is that Black women in particular if they having any sort of relationship with a man that they want to bag, then they blatantly, brazenly attempt to use pregnancy as a tool and a method of entrapment. So that's a very widespread thing, and in the black community at least, is something that women resort to very casually as a method of. Now, it works very rarely. So if they say, well, you've made me pregnant, even though she may have been dating a number of men at the same time, she'll pick the man that she thinks might be the best husband or father, or most likely to be, and then say that he's the one that got her pregnant. So, and that's the entrapment method. Now, there's very few men are going to accept that. Well, what happened to your contraception? I forgot to take it. What do you mean you forgot to take it? That's crazy. If you forget to take it, then you tell me when you're pregnant and so on. Now, at this point, the woman has a second layer of threat. Not only can she emotionally sort of intimidate the guy by saying, well, you're the father, you have to marry me and you have to stay with me, that sort of thing. But she can also say, well, there's nothing you can do about it, I'm pregnant now. If I choose not to have an abortion, then I'm going to keep the child and you'll have to pay child support to me for the next 25 years. So if you don't marry me, then I'm going to stick you with child support for forever. Your life will be destroyed. You won't have a nickel to bless yourself with if you don't do as I say. So that's the second. Now, not many men will take kindly to those sort of threats and intimidation, but the state will fully support her in those efforts. So what a lot of black men do, as I understand it at least, is they say, well, screw you. I'll work labouring jobs under the table for cash like all these illegal Mexican immigrants. I may not make much money, but at least I'll get by. But at least you're not screwing me for money for decades into the future. So the whole thing falls to pieces on that basis. She then looks at the welfare she can claim by having the child. So she may decide to keep it on, or if she's young enough, may decide to abort it, or if she thinks she has other opportunities, if she thinks she can snare another guy or whatever, then she may do the abortion. So there's a whole lot of social black community politics that are going into this. But desertion, I would argue, is a very minimal contribution to it. Now, if we look at the welfare that's extended, in the prior to the Great Society, wasn't really available. The black men whose wages have been depressed relentlessly by mass immigration, their jobs barely pay enough to keep a family together and pay for a family. So they're going to live a life of near penury if they go down the path of having a family, because so few black jobs pay enough money to support a family. So if for example, he does get together with the woman, then they both have to work full time to live a very mediocre existence. So she can look at the amount of benefits she can claim by having all these children. It's not unusual to see a black woman at 30 years old who's got 5 or 6 children by 5 or 6 different partners. So she can claim a lot of benefits from that. Whatever child support that the state will extort from the men, she also gets that. So she can actually do passably well out of this and not have to work at all as well. So the welfare state encourages this level of sloth and exploitation of the benefits that are available. So this is all part of these issues all feed into the one thing of why there are fatherless homes. So we could address it by saying, well, let's drastically reduce the immigration rate. Why we're bringing in illiterate peasants from the third world that compete directly for the same jobs that most black men are working at. So why do we not go back to the marriage contract and say, let's restore some validity and value to that? Why do we not go to a situation where we say, well, entrapment, through using pregnancy as a method of entrapment, that's not acceptable, and so on and so forth. So there are various things that we can do as a society and as a government and so on, if we really cared, that could go some way, if not most of the way to addressing some of these issues. It is a problem. Fatherless households are a problem. We dispute that, but there are many. Most of the way to addressing some of these issues. It is a problem. Fatherless households are a problem, and I don't think anyone would necessarily dispute that, but there are many factors that contribute to this, and they aid and abet and assist, if not indirectly promote, fatherless households. And we need to address those rather than just say those damn bastard low-life men deserting their families, because that's not what's happening. You know, you can find instances of that, but there are a whole range of other factors. That brings me now to this idea of black abortion. Now, the same black Congress said that, and I think I'm quoting him here accurately, that over the last 40 years, some 40 million black abortions took place in the United States. So we're talking ballpark a million a year. Now that seems to be a lot. If you look at the abortion clinics in the United States, a lot of them seem to be in black neighbourhoods. So you've got to assume it's maybe a indirect government policy. But if you look at the amount of abortions that are taking place, the vast majority of those are from much younger girls. Should a 12-year-old girl be encouraged to keep a child? But is abortion acceptable there, or should these babies be brought to full term and born, and then should full term and born, and then should they be adopted out, for example? So there are other mechanisms that create problems, and therefore, there are other mechanisms that could be used, but how sensible and reasonable are they and practical? Why should a society create problems and then run around desperately trying to address those problems, and yet make a mess of the corrective action? So I don't see solutions easily at hand there. In terms of adult black women who are in poverty, maybe they're psychologically impaired and things like that, then should they have permission to, or be encouraged or aided or assisted to abort early in the process? There's certainly an argument for that. Again, do I think it's desirable or undesirable? I don't have a direct opinion on that from pure practical necessity rather than some higher moral calling. Then I think it's something that should be debated. But those are my views. I'll make one final comment on this. Certainly in black communities around the world that I've come across, whether they be in first world countries or not, they still cling very much to the communal, tribal concepts and ways of living of their ancestors from 400 or 500 years ago. I find that stunning that black people in America can, who may have come out in the 1700s or been brought out in the 1700s, so they're 10th, 11th, 12th generation on in some cases, yet they still live the communal life that they would have lived in Africa, or many facets of it. And it's not unusual in Africa where one man may have intimate relations with several women. That's sort of how things happen in Africa. It's not considered unusual or strange. It's just how it is. You come into the austere, religious, monogamous type family concept of the West and the particularly the Protestant type life and work ethic. So they're still living that African, in a societal sense, they're still living that African thing. So they're not doing anything that they wouldn't have done in Africa, but yet it shows the incredible non-success of social assimilation to Western lifestyles that's occurred in, for example, the United States. And that needs to be looked at as well, because if you can't integrate people after 10 plus generations into your society, then something has failed and failed horribly. You've been with Tasseless today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.